A bowl of cereal destroyed a brotherhood and built an empire. It began with a simple idea, that the human body could be purified through discipline, restraint, and a bowl of bland cereal. In the quiet town of Battle Creek, a movement was forming, one that blended health reform, religious conviction, and rigid moral philosophy. At the center of it stood two brothers, whose partnership would shape breakfast tables across the world, even as it unraveled behind closed doors. They were raised in an atmosphere of devotion and strict belief, taught that the body was both a temple and a battleground. Pleasure was suspect. Indulgence was weakness. Food itself was moral terrain. From these convictions grew an institution dedicated to reforming lives through diet, routine, and control. Patients arrived seeking healing, but what they entered was closer to a carefully engineered system of belief. The older brother believed in purification above all. He viewed the modern world as corrupt, overstimulated, morally decaying. Spices, meat, even excessive flavor were threats to both health and virtue. His philosophy was clear. If desire could be reduced, society could be saved. In the kitchens and laboratories of the Sanitarium, experiments were conducted not to delight the palate, but to discipline it. Out of this environment came a simple, toasted flake made from grain, light, dry, and intentionally plain. The younger brother saw something different. Where one saw moral reform, the other saw possibility. The flake was not just a health experiment, it was a product. It could travel beyond the walls of the institution. It could be packaged, sold, advertised. It could reach homes far from Battle Creek. He understood that taste, branding, and accessibility mattered as much as ideology. The cereal did not need to be a sermon, it could be breakfast. At first the partnership worked. Production expanded. Demand grew. The flakes, once served quietly to patients seeking reform, began appearing in grocery stores. The public embraced the novelty of ready-to-eat cereal. Convenience was modern. The nation was changing, and the product fit perfectly into an era defined by speed and urban life. But beneath this growth, resentment brewed. The older brother felt ownership not only of the recipe, but of its purpose. To him, commercialization diluted the moral mission. Advertising felt dishonest, even vulgar. Sugar, flavor enhancements, and bold claims were betrayals of principle. The cereal had been born from restraint. Turning it into a mass-market sensation felt like surrender. The younger brother disagreed. He believed that if a product was to survive, it had to adapt. The public would not embrace austerity for its own sake. Packaging needed color, marketing needed promise. Profit was not corruption, it was sustainability. He pushed forward, refining the cereal, expanding distribution, building factories that hummed with industrial ambition. The conflict was not merely about business, it was personal. Years of tension, ideological differences, and unspoken competition hardened into bitterness. The older brother accused the younger of greed, of abandoning principle for money. The younger accused the older of rigidity, of clinging to control at the expense of growth. The cereal, once a shared creation, became contested ground. Legal battles followed. Trademarks were disputed, names were claimed and reclaimed. The brand that would become a global icon was forged not only through innovation, but through courtroom arguments and fractured trust. The brothers, once united by belief and blood, now stood opposed, each convinced of his righteousness. As profits soared, the younger brother constructed a mansion that symbolized his triumph. It rose with confidence, its architecture reflecting both success and permanence. Wide staircases, polished wood, expansive windows, every detail suggested that the gamble had paid off. The flake had conquered breakfast, and the fortune it generated demanded expression. Yet the mansion carried a shadow. It was not merely a home, it was a declaration. To some it represented vision rewarded. To others, it embodied the very excess that the cereal's origins had sought to resist. The irony was impossible to ignore. A product created to suppress indulgence had financed opulence. A philosophy rooted in restraint had given birth to abundance. The older brother remained devoted to his institution, to lectures and reform, to the belief that health was moral discipline. He watched as the cereal's fame spread far beyond his influence. The world embraced it not as a symbol of purification, but as convenience and comfort. The message had shifted, even if the product remained. Their estrangement deepened. Family gatherings became rare. Communication cooled into silence. The success that should have unified them instead magnified their differences. Wealth did not heal the rift, it widened it. Each brother built a legacy, but neither rebuilt the bridge between them. The mansion stood as a physical reminder of that divide. Its rooms echoed with achievement, yet also with absence. It was built on innovation, yes, but also on rivalry. Every brick seemed to carry the tension of a partnership that had fractured under pressure. Visitors admired its elegance, unaware of the conflict woven into its foundation. As years passed, the cereal became a staple of daily life. Children poured it into bowls without knowing the moral debates that shaped it. Advertising softened its image, associating it with family warmth rather than discipline. The brand evolved, introducing sweetness, mascots, and colorful packaging. The original austerity faded into history. The brothers' story, however, did not fade so easily. It became a cautionary tale of ambition and ideology colliding. One pursued purity at all cost. The other pursued growth with equal intensity. Both believed they were serving a greater good. Both felt betrayed. In the end, the twisted nature of their story lies not in the cereal itself, but in what it revealed about power, control, and belief. A simple flake of grain became the center of a struggle over identity and legacy. The mansion, grand and imposing, stands as proof that even the most ordinary product can carry extraordinary conflict. What began as an effort to reform society ended in division. The breakfast table, quiet and unassuming, hides a history of rivalry and resentment. The cereal that promised simplicity was born from complexity, and the fortune it generated built walls that could not be torn down by time or success. At the heart of the story lies a fundamental divide between belief and ambition, a fracture that did not begin with money, but with philosophy. The older brother viewed the world through a moral lens shaped by discipline, religious conviction, and a deep suspicion of indulgence. To him, food was not merely nourishment, it was a force capable of shaping character. Every ingredient carried ethical weight. Every flavor could either elevate or corrupt the human spirit. In his mind, modern society was suffering from excess. Too much meat, too many spices, too much stimulation. Reforming the body through diet was a path toward reforming the soul. Within the sanitarium he directed, routine was sacred. Patients followed strict schedules, ate carefully measured meals, and embraced a lifestyle designed to eliminate temptation. The environment functioned almost like a controlled experiment in moral engineering. When the now famous cornflake was developed, it was never intended to be indulgent or even particularly enjoyable. It was deliberately simple, dry, and restrained. Its purpose was to calm desire, not excite it. It symbolized control over appetite, and by extension, control over weakness. The younger brother understood the product differently. While he recognized its origins, he saw beyond the walls of the sanitarium. He saw a nation undergoing rapid change, urban growth, industrial expansion, shifting family structures. Breakfast needed to become faster and more convenient. The cereal had potential not just as a dietary reform tool, but as a commercial breakthrough. He understood packaging, branding, and distribution in ways that his brother did not prioritize. He believed that innovation meant adaptation. This difference in perspective slowly hardened into opposition. The older brother believed commercialization diluted purpose. If the cereal became a commodity, it would lose its moral foundation. Marketing would exaggerate benefits, invite competition, and introduce compromises. He feared that profit would distort intention. In his worldview, once money became central, integrity would erode. The flake would transform from a vehicle of reform into just another product on a shelf. The younger brother did not see profit as corruption. He saw it as validation. If people purchased the cereal willingly, that meant it had value. If demand increased, production should expand. He believed that influence required scale. A product confined to one institution could not shape the broader culture. By bringing the cereal into homes across the country, he was not betraying its origins, he was amplifying its reach. Their disagreement exposed a deeper tension between purity and pragmatism. The older brother operated from conviction, often uncompromising and rigid. His sense of purpose was rooted in ideology, and ideology left little room for adjustment. The younger brother operated from opportunity. He was flexible, strategic, and aware of public appetite. He understood that if the cereal remained too plain, too associated with strict reform, it would never achieve widespread appeal. As production expanded, practical questions emerged. Should sugar be added to improve taste? Should the packaging highlight T-health claims more boldly? Should the brand name be refined to stand out in a growing market? Each decision became a battlefield. To the older brother, sweetening the cereal represented surrender to indulgence. To the younger, it represented responsiveness to consumer preference. The conflict extended beyond product formulation. It became personal, touching on control and recognition. Who owned the idea? Who had the right to shape its future? The cereal may have been born in a shared environment, but its trajectory depended on choices neither could fully agree on. As success grew, so did tension. Profits amplified pride. Expansion magnified ego. The original collaboration fractured under the weight of competing visions. The older brother clung to the belief that principles must guide practice. He saw himself as protector of a mission larger than commerce. In his view, surrendering control would mean abandoning the moral experiment he had built. The younger brother saw delay and hesitation as threats. Markets moved quickly. Competitors emerged. If they did not act decisively, someone else would seize the opportunity. Their arguments reflected a broader societal shift. America itself was grappling with modernization. Traditional values collided with industrial capitalism. Reform movements existed alongside corporate expansion. The brothers embodied this tension. One represented restraint and reform, the other represented growth and innovation. As legal disputes unfolded, ideology gave way to litigation. Trademarks and rights became tools in a struggle that had once been philosophical. What began as a debate about purpose evolved into a battle over ownership. The language shifted from morality to law, from belief to strategy. The tragedy of their divide lies in its inevitability. Two strong convictions, rooted in different interpretations of the same creation, could not coexist indefinitely. The cereal became more than food. It became a symbol of whose vision old define the future. The older brother's insistence on purity and the younger brother's pursuit of scale were not easily reconciled. In the end, ambition proved more adaptable than ideology. The market favored accessibility over austerity. The cereal reached millions, reshaped breakfast habits, and generated immense wealth. Yet beneath that success remained the unresolved tension between what it was meant to represent and what it ultimately became. The cereal empire that would eventually dominate breakfast tables did not rise from harmony. It emerged from friction, mistrust, and a rivalry that intensified as profits grew. What the public saw as innovation and success was, behind the scenes, a slow unraveling of partnership. The wealth that followed did not unite the brothers, it divided them more sharply than any philosophical disagreement had before. At first, the product's growth seemed like shared achievement. Orders increased, factories expanded, distribution networks stretched across states. The name on the box began to carry recognition, and with recognition came influence. But success changes dynamics. When money begins to flow in significant amounts, questions of control become unavoidable. Who decides the direction of the company? Who holds legal authority over the brand? Who receives credit for its creation? These questions turned private tension into open conflict. The older brother believed that because the cereal had been developed within his institution, its ownership was inherently tied to his leadership and moral vision. He saw the younger brother's push toward aggressive marketing as an encroachment not only on business territory, but on ideological territory. To him, it felt as though his life's work was being reshaped without consent. The younger brother, meanwhile, believed that without his initiative, the cereal would have remained a local curiosity. He had invested energy, strategy, and risk into scaling the operation. He believed owners' HIP should reflect effort and foresight, not just origin. From his perspective, he was not stealing a vision but fulfilling its potential. Legal battles soon replaced private arguments. Trademarks became weapons. Contracts were examined, contested, rewritten. The very name associated with the cereal became a subject of dispute. Courtrooms, not kitchens, became the setting where the future of the empire would be decided. These proceedings exposed the depth of mistrust that had grown between them. What had once been family discussion now required attorneys and judges. The public remained largely unaware of the bitterness unfolding behind the brand. Boxes of cereal continued to appear on store shelves, bright and inviting. Advertisements promised health, energy, and modern convenience. Consumers associated the product with optimism and progress. Few imagined that the fortune accumulating behind it was tied to fractured relationships and unresolved resentment. As the younger brother consolidated control, his approach to business grew more ambitious. He invested heavily in advertising, understanding that repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity builds loyalty. He refined packaging, ensuring that the cereal stood out visually among competitors. He explored new markets, believing expansion was the key to permanence. Each strategic move strengthened the company's position and widened the emotional gap between the brothers. The wealth generated by this expansion was immense. Factories multiplied. Employees were hired in large numbers. Profits funded philanthropic projects and community initiatives. On the surface, the empire appeared not only successful, but benevolent. Yet beneath this prosperity lingered the knowledge that its foundation rested on rivalry. The construction of the mansion marked a turning point. It was not merely a private residence, it was a visible testament to triumph. Built with care and grandeur, it reflected both financial achievement and personal vindication. For the younger brother, it symbolized independence, proof that his gamble on commercialization had been justified. For the older brother, it represented something closer to betrayal, a monument to profit, rising from principles he believed had been compromised. Family ties, once strained, became nearly non-existent. Communication reduced to formalities. Shared history offered little comfort. Wealth, rather than healing wounds, solidified positions. Each brother built his own legacy, but the absence of reconciliation shadowed their achievements. Success did not erase resentment, it preserved it. The irony is that the cereal itself remained simple, almost humble in form. A small flake of toasted grain had triggered legal disputes, personal estrangement, and architectural display. Its simplicity contrasted sharply with the complexity of the conflict it inspired. Consumers poured it into bowls each morning, without awareness of the tension embedded in its history. Over tea, the empire's growth obscured its origins. The brand became synonymous with routine and reliability. Generations grew up associating it with childhood and comfort. The narrative of rivalry faded from public view, replaced by corporate storytelling focused on innovation and quality. The brothers' dispute became a footnote rather than a headline, yet the cost of that conflict remained personal. Wealth secured influence, but it did not restore trust. The mansion stood as both celebration and reminder, a structure financed by victory, yet haunted by division. Within its walls lived not just prosperity, but the echo of arguments that had reshaped a family. The empire thrived because it adapted to market demands. It embraced flavor variations, expanded product lines, and refined branding. It learned that longevity requires evolution. But adaptation came at a price. The original unity of purpose dissolved, replaced by individual ambition. In the broader context of American industry, the brothers' story reflects a familiar pattern. Innovation often begins in collaboration but matures in competition. Shared ideas become contested assets. Relationships strain under financial pressure. The line between partnership and rivalry blurs as stakes increase. What makes this story particularly striking is the contrast between the product's wholesome image and the bitterness behind its rise. A cereal marketed as healthy and simple was built on complexity and fracture. The wealth it generated reshaped communities and breakfast habits alike, yet it also reshaped a family beyond repair. The mansion that rose from the success of the cereal empire was more than a residence, it was a declaration carved in stone. Built on rolling land and designed with precision, it reflected not only wealth but vindication. Every column, every terrace, every imported detail signaled that ambition had prevailed. It stood as visible proof that commercialization, expansion, and strategic risk had transformed a simple flake of grain into generational fortune. Yet beneath its symmetry and grandeur lay a quieter truth. The structure was as much about rivalry as it was about reward. Architecture has always been a language of power. The scale of the mansion communicated permanence. Its elevated position suggested oversight and control. Guests approaching its entrance would have understood immediately that they were stepping into a space shaped by success. The carefully landscaped grounds created distance from the outside world, reinforcing the separation between ordinary life and extraordinary wealth. It was designed to impress, but also to insulate. Inside, rooms unfolded in deliberate sequence. Grand halls transitioned into intimate studies. Decorative ceilings hovered above polished floors. Light filtered through tall windows, illuminating walls adorned with art and craftsmanship. Every space was curated to reflect taste and authority. Yet even in its beauty, the mansion carried tensio. It was financed by a story that had never truly resolved itself. Prosperity filled the rooms, but so did the memory of conflict. For the man who built it, the mansion represented validation. Legal battles had been fought, doubts had been cast, criticism had been endured. Now success stood undeniable in brick and marble. The house was not only a reward, it was an answer to those who had questioned his direction. Its presence suggested that pragmatism had triumphed over rigidity, that adaptability had proven stronger than ideology. But architecture cannot silence history. The wealth that funded the estate originated in disagreement. Every imported fixture, every carefully carved detail, traced back to a partnership that fractured under pressure. The mansion became a monument not only to enterprise, but to division. It celebrated achievement, while quietly reminding its owner of what had been sacrificed along the way. The irony is that the product itself remained unassuming. Corn Flakes did not evoke grandeur. They were modest, light, almost fragile. Yet the scale of the fortune they produced enabled structures that rivaled estates built on railroads or steel. This contrast made the mansion's existence all the more striking. Something so simple had generated something so immense. Over time, the estate began to embody a broader shift in American identity. It symbolized the transformation of reform into industry, of health philosophy into mass production. What began as a controlled dietary experiment had evolved into a national brand. The mansion stood at the end of that evolution, its walls absorbing the narrative of expansion and adaptation. Visitors likely saw elegance and prosperity. Few would have sensed the undercurrent of rivalry embedded in its foundation. The house functioned as a social stage, hosting gatherings that reinforced status and influence. Conversations flowed beneath chandeliers, echoing through rooms that had been designed to project stability. Yet beneath the surface of hospitality lingered the knowledge that this stability had come at personal cost. As decades passed, the meaning of the mansion shifted. Generational change altered its symbolism. What once felt like a bold statement of success began to feel like a relic of a particular era. Maintenance grew expensive. Social attitudes toward extreme displays of wealth evolved. The very scale that once impressed now seemed excessive. The house, built to suggest permanence, confronted the reality of time. Its eventual decline mirrored the changing nature of power. Wealth no longer required monumental architecture to assert itself. Influence became less visible, more corporate, more abstract. The mansion, fixed in place and tied to a specific story, struggled to maintain relevance. Without the cultural admiration that once sustained it, the structure's meaning softened. When preservation debates surfaced, they reflected more than financial concerns. They raised questions about memory and legacy. Was the mansion an architectural treasure worth saving, or a symbol of an uncomfortable chapter in industrial history? Should it stand as a tribute to innovation, or as a reminder of rivalry and division? These questions underscored how deeply intertwined the building was with narrative. If walls could speak, they would tell a story not only of dinners and decor but of ambition sharpened by disagreement. They would reveal that wealth can build monuments, but it cannot repair fractured trust. The mansion's grandeur could not erase the tension that financed it. Its elegance could not rewrite the emotional cost embedded in its origin. In the end, whether preserved, repurposed, or demolished, the mansion remains a metaphor. It represents how success often carries complexity beneath its surface. It shows how achievement can coexist with loss, how prosperity can rise from conflict, and how physical structures sometimes outlast the relationships that created them. Even as the estate ages or disappears, the lessons embedded in its construction endure, reminding us that the architecture of wealth is never purely material but deeply human. The story of the Kellogg brothers is not simply about cereal, success, or a mansion built from breakfast profits. It is a story about how vision can divide as easily as it can inspire, and how ambition can both build empires and fracture families. What began as a shared experiment rooted in belief and discipline evolved into a commercial revolution that reshaped American industry. But along the way, partnership gave way to rivalry, and unity dissolved into legal battles and silence. The Sanitarium empire stands today as proof of innovation and strategic brilliance. It changed how millions of people began their mornings. It influenced advertising, packaging, and the very concept of branded consumer goods. Yet behind that polished legacy lies a quieter truth. The foundation of this success was strained by mistrust and competition. Wealth multiplied, factories expanded, and a mansion rose in triumph, but reconciliation never followed. The mansion itself became the ultimate symbol of this contradiction. Built from the profits of a product originally intended to promote restraint and simplicity, it represented excess, permanence, and personal vindication. It was both a reward and a reminder. Every polished floor and towering column reflected ambition fulfilled, but also a partnership broken beyond repair. It showed how power once gained often drifts far from its original purpose. Over time, the public remembered the brand and forgot the bitterness. The cereal remained wholesome, familiar, and comforting. The rivalry faded into the background of corporate history, but the deeper lesson remains intact. Innovation can create opportunity, yet the pursuit of control can overshadow shared beginnings. Success can elevate a name, yet leave relationships behind. In the end, this documentary is not about breakfast or architecture. It is about the cost of ambition when it outpaces loyalty, and the quiet truth that behind many great fortunes lies a story far more complicated than the packaging suggests. And perhaps the greatest irony of all is that something as small as a flake of corn proved powerful enough to build a mansion, divide a family, and leave a legacy shaped as much by conflict as by success.